What's up, y'all? It's Marcus. So today we're going to do my initial review of the Canon EOS R5. What it's great at, what it needs improvement on. We're going to use some crazy light modifiers, do some indoor boudoir shooting. I'm going to give you the raw files. I'm going to give you some raw video files, so stick around after this B-roll.
If looks could kill, if looks could kill, one glance, long stare, easy on the eyes, moving slowly like shadows in the night.
So all the photos we're going to edit today are going to be edited with my Lightroom presets and Photoshop Actions. So please go to ProPhotoEdits.com where you can download those and they'll help you out with all your editing needs. So that was filmed in 4K 120 on the Canon EOS R5. And stick around toward the end of this video and I'm going to let you know my thoughts on that and the epic problems that are going to plague this camera if they're not fixed for video. But for stills, let's get into this part. So on this shoot, I brought my EOS R5, my GFX 50R, and we'll do a comparison in the next video between these two. And I brought my 50 RF 1.2, 85 RF 1.2, and my 35 1.4 L2, and they all performed flawlessly. So this thing in the upper left hand corner on my 8600 is a newer spot snoot, and it takes these little metal things that are called gobos, and they kind of mimic how their shape was designed. So some of them look like a window with light coming through, some of them look like the blinds open with light coming through. So I wanted to do something just different today because, you know, I get bored easily. So we started out shooting on the floor because the wood always gives you a nice little reflection of ambient light, as you can see it coming through the real blinds on the back. And then I put the blind gobo in there that mimics the lines that you would get from harsh light coming through the blinds. And I shot a couple shots like that, and I'll show you how they turned out.
I'm slowly gonna do you in. Your time has come. If looks could kill.
So we set up the newer spotlight in one more area here against the wall, and I wanted to kind of mimic how it would look coming through if the blinds were really harsh in the middle of the day. And this is how this shot turned out on the R5.
You'd be dead right now.
So I had my fun with the light, trying different stuff. So I wanted to get up on a chair here and get a downward shot like I sometimes like to do here with the R5. And I'm just using natural light coming from the window behind this. And I like this perspective a lot of times with the 35. I think it looks really cool. So you can kind of see where the light's coming from back here. And sometimes I'll try to get a couple angles from above with the model looking up at me. So I'll show you how this shot turned out, and they can give you my thoughts on the R5. And these raw files will be down below so you can check them out for yourself.
If looks could kill.
Alright, so good news for photographers. Let's start with the good news first. The R5 is possibly the best camera you can buy right now for taking stills, and I wholeheartedly believe that. The dynamic range, you hear me shout about dynamic range all the time from my Z7, Z6. Of course, the GFX has incredible dynamic range, and shot with the EOS R for a long time, taking a lot of great images with it, but the dynamic range wasn't really there, and the colors on the EOS R weren't really there either. But it gave me access to all this epic glass, the 1.2s, the RF, the new stuff. So I kind of just put up with it, and it was an okay camera, I would say. But this falling in line with the R5 is a totally another level. It's just the dynamic range is up there with the Z7. The colors are finally back to just what I really like to see coming out of the camera just as a raw file. It lets me shoot underexposed like I like to shoot. I don't have any quality loss. The autofocus is superb. The IBIS is incredible. I have absolutely zero qualms with this as a picture camera, and I won't be returning it for any reason now. I want to get into stuff that will appeal to the hybrid shooters and what Canon did marketing this camera. And this is not going to be really a rant, but just reality here. So I'm going to let this 4K 120 footage play that you can download in the description below and play with it yourself. I'm going to let it play while I give you my thoughts on this as a hybrid camera and a video camera and the way it was marketed. So check this out. I was shooting this video the way I normally do, and the reason why it's so short is because the camera overheated like hell. And I'll tell you why. And I have realistic expectations, guys. I'm not a dreamer. I've owned all these cameras and I know what they're capable of and what they're not. So it's 68 degrees in her house. I'm almost cold, you know. I get there, I use the camera. I'm using two cameras. I'm using the GFX 50. I'm using the EOS R5. So I'm turning the R5 off every chance I get. I'm just taking stills. I maybe took, I don't know, 100 stills, maybe 200 the most. Because I was using a strobe most of the time, you know, I wasn't doing bursts. It was just one photo, turning it off, grabbing the other camera. So about 45 minutes in, an hour in, I go to pick it up and I throw it on my Ronin and I say, okay, let's go ahead and shoot some slow-mo, some B-roll, and we'll go through some ideas here and shoot like I do with all my cameras. I turn it on, I go in and check. I should have my 13 minutes or whatever of 4K slow-mo. And how much do I have? 4 minutes. 4 minutes from sitting in a 68 degree room taking pictures for an hour, and not an hour total, maybe 25 minutes of total use time. That's unacceptable. So problem number 2, while you're trying to frame up your shots, the clock is ticking. It doesn't actually say, you know, 2:59, 2:58. It just goes from 3 minutes, and the next thing you know, you have 2 minutes left you can record. And you haven't even been recording. You've just been framing up your shots with the camera on for video. That is insane. Had I known this, I would have tried to shoot my video first, but this isn't a real world scenario where you can just say, hey, this shoot video first and this shoot 4K 120, and then we'll try to decide on what we should do with the remaining time. And okay, well, this shoot 1080 120. Well, guess what? 1080 120 isn't even in the camera, and that's ridiculous. Canon has to put that in this camera. It's in the R6. What are they trying to do? Make us buy an R6 to go along with an R5? I don't believe for 1 second. And I'm never a complainer. I just love creative tools. But this is the only camera that I own of any kind that cannot get me through an entire shoot, and a small shoot at that, of shooting photo and video. The way this camera is right now, the overheating is so bad and the recovery times are so bad, which I'll get into in just a second. This is going to be long, but you guys are going to spend your hard-earned money on this. You have to know the truth. The footage is incredible. I'm not going to knock the footage. The 4K 120, all the modes that I've tested in the C-Log is just great. I love it. Autofocus is insane. I love the footage, okay? You don't get enough of it. You can't use the footage for what it's supposed to be. I don't care about 8K. I don't mess with that at all. It doesn't appeal to me at all. But if you want to use it for video, you better not take any pictures on it, and only start with your video. And if you plan on doing a lot of video that day, you have to get your 4K 120 out of the way first. And then you're going to be switching to line skipping mode, 4K 30, you know, or 1080p up to 60 is all they have in there right now, which is ridiculous. But keep in mind that once that time is gone, you know, and I've tested it outdoors in the heat, and it did give me my, I don't know, about 10 minutes of total 4K 120 time, and that was in short bursts. I was trying to use it the way I normally would use it, and it gave me, you know, about 10 minutes of total time, which I'm just like babying the camera, turning it off, sitting in the shade, not framing up my shots, taking little clips. That's not really the way you can use it, and you can't flip into 1080 120 and just say, okay, I'm gonna film the rest of this in 1080 120 because it's not there. All right, enough about that. Maybe they'll add it. They better add it, or I'm gonna be making a bunch of bad videos about it, because this is just not the way you treat customers. I have no unrealistic expectations about what money buys. I paid $3,500 for my Z7, my D850, D810, A7R3. That's just how much a good camera costs. But all of those cameras, I mean, besides the D850 and D810, they sucked at video, could get me through an entire day of shooting both with no problems. Quality is up in the air between all of them, but the new Sony a7S III can get you through a whole day. And yes, I've shot video on the a7R III in terrible conditions, and yes, it did overheat on me. But when it overheated on me, I stick it in the shade for a minute, and I'm talking about a real minute or two, open all the ports, get back out there and be shooting. And if it overheated again, I'd give it a minute and I'd shoot some more. I'd have the ports open, the card slots open, the door open there, and it would be just fine after giving it a couple minutes. 5 hours later, after my camera totally overheated and I couldn't take any more video here, it still only had 5 minutes of total record time at 4K 120. Okay? 5 hours later. That is a software limit. The camera is not hot. And 5 minutes later, it should be allowing me to take another 3 to 4 minutes. That's what the camera should be doing. And I don't want you to think that the Atomos Ninja V is going to fix all your problems, because it is not. It's only going to fix the 4K HQ 30 frames per second, because 4K 60 is not HQ, but it'll give you, I don't know, 4 hours of that without recording or overheating. But you have to know that while you're doing that, the camera's still going to be building heat. So if you want to hop into 4K 120, 8K if that's your thing, you won't be able to do it, because those modes don't go to the Ninja V. It's incapable of recording 4K 120 or 8K. And your camera's still going to be getting hot internally, and you're going to say, let me shoot some 4K 120, and you're not going to be able to do it. It's going to be too hot. And when the cooldown time is means come back tomorrow and try again, it is just ridiculous. No other camera on the market that I've owned modern in the last 5 years cannot get me through a day of shooting, limited shooting like this for both sides. Incredibly frustrating and just deceitful. I'm giving you a lot of information here because there's a lot of people that say, it's a still's first camera, what do you expect? 1DX Mark II is a still's first camera. 1DX Mark III is a still's first camera. They don't overheat. I've got through incredible weddings, all-day shoots doing photo and video with those, with the A7Rs, with the Z7, with the Z6. And don't act like Canon didn't go on for months about the king is back. 8K video. This is a video-centric camera, right? You guys were even saying at one point, does this thing take pictures? Does it take pictures? Because they didn't even mention about the any of the picture specs until the day it came out for pre-order. They gave you all those specs. For months and months they're leading up with all these things about video, right? They marketed this in a way that's a video-centric camera that cannot get you through a half an hour shoot of video. And even when you're trying to use it in all these ways where you're mapping out your shots and figuring out which type of resolution you need to use first before it runs out, because you'll never get back to it again, which is unacceptable. You can't do anything else with the camera. You can't take pictures with it, right? So this is not a photo first camera in the way they marketed it. Yes, all these cameras are photo first cameras. The C300, C200, all those things don't appeal to us. They're too big, they're crop sensor, they don't do the things that we need. You can't gimbal them and just go on and shoot what you need to do. And this is a huge market. The video market is taking over the photo market in the next 5 years for sure. You can't come out and lead with all these deceitful things. I was having a conversation with a guy the other day and he told me, well, they didn't ever say that you could shoot, 100 photos and still have your 12 or 13 minutes left. They didn't. Of course they didn't say that, because they just thought that any rational person would assume that you'd still have 95% of your time left to shoot your video, not 35% of your time left to shoot your video. It is a nightmare, and it can be fixed. Don't let Canon fool you. You have to stay on them about this. This is a software limit. It can be fixed, and I'm not asking them to give us unlimited amount of times of all these things. It just has to be real world usable. A good 20 minutes of 4K 120 or 4K HQ mode 30, whatever, is fine if you can just have the thing recover in a matter of minutes, which it can do. We're looking into all this tilt-a-fan stuff and seeing what's going to happen with that. I don't know what the future holds for all this type of stuff, but I know they have to fix it. And you have to add 1080p 120. This is ridiculous. All the other cameras do this and yours can't. And I'm only saying this because I love the camera, and it could be so brilliant. The A7S III is not going to give you these type of problems, but I love the Canon. So I'm going to stick it out and see what they do, but just know that, the way it is right now, you better buy two. And even if you have two, you're still going to have to think logistically, how do I use these before they run out of time, because the recovery time is so bad. All right, you guys, I just wanted to give you my full thoughts. Sorry I had to do a rant, but from a real world perspective, it's impossible to use this as a hybrid camera the way they marketed it. It just is. And all the other cameras that aren't marketed as hybrid cameras that I own get me through those days, and they do a fine job. So keep that in mind whenever you're spending your money. And until next time, download the raw files, play with them. I'll be doing plenty of shoots here coming up. So I love you guys. It's Marcus. I'll see you later.